Hello everyone, LOREMASTER Sotek here, taking a brief break from a lot of the stuff I'm working on at the moment to cover this excellent news we've had released from Creative Assembly. Isn't it nice? I'm back and can actually talk about stuff that's happening. So, this is actually, I think, this is the first video I've actually done since I've been back. So, hello! Yes, I'm back. Hi there. A couple of quick things before we hop into this article. I know there are a lot of things that have been revealed and released and such since I've been gone. I missed pretty much all of the Ogre Kingdom stuff, though obviously I'm here for what seems to be kind of the tail end of it. I will be covering all of the Ogre Kingdom stuff that I've missed over the course of the next few weeks. Basically, I will just be putting out a video a day, at least, trying to get caught up on everything. I will, if there's something that I consider like super non-important, then I won't bother with it, but most stuff I'm going to cover. And we will be getting back to a normal schedule starting next week. Unfortunately, even though I am back this week, I have to leave for Austin on Friday because I am going to the Games Workshop Grand Tournament for Age of Sigmar, which is awesome, but that's also why I'm super busy right now, because I'm finishing painting up the last bits of models that I've got to get ready for the tournament, and I got to make sure that everything's like working and not broken, and get all my lists submitted and everything. So I'm unfortunately very busy this week, and I leave on Friday, but I get back on Sunday, so on Monday we will be back to a normal schedule. Outside of that, I hope you're all doing really well. And I will make a separate video about this, but I do want to say, if you are going to the Grand Tournament in Austin, or if you happen to live in the Austin area, I would love to be able to do dinner one night and just have anybody and everybody that would like to come join, and we can all hang out and talk about Warhammer and Total War Warhammer and all that stuff, and go out and grab a bite to eat and all that jazz. So if that's something you'd be interested in, please keep kind of your ear put on the space. I should have a video out tomorrow with details, and hopefully we can work something out, and I can say hi to a bunch of y'all. But in any event, let's go ahead and dive into the Ogre Kingdoms roster reveal. So, of course, the Ogre Kingdoms in all of their full glory have been heavily revealed, and now we are getting the roster. The Ogre Kingdoms are about 95% done. There's just a few little things missing from the roster, which I'm sure will come or be released into the game later on. But let's go ahead and take a look at what is in the roster. So first, we've got, of course, the legendary lords. We've got Trade Lord Grease's Tribe Stealer, Great Drake Crush, Gate Crasher, Horde Master Goldtooth, the Shockingly Obese. And he looks fantastic. Of course, his model has been updated to make him function better in a 3D live environment type situation. So instead of being dragged around on a literal carpet of Nablars who are constantly pouring out gold around him, he's instead on a very lavish cart made by the Nablars and travels around with lots and lots of riches, but he still is holding true to his storyline that he is far too wealthy to walk. He's too important to walk. He deserves to be driven around. So now he's got two little Nablars that are kind of elite bodyguards that are mainly responsible for just moving him around on his wheelbarrow, and it's glorious. I genuinely love it. I think it makes just fine. I think it works just great. Like, it honestly works fine. I know some people aren't a fan of it. For me, it's great. I'm glad that it's clearly a Nablar construction. I think if they had gone with the cart and they had tried to make it like crazy ornate, like something along the lines of Thorgrim's Throne of Power, or like a lot of those other like super fancy things, I don't think it would have felt right. I think it would have felt un-ogurly, and it too orderly, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I like that you can tell it is literally a ramshackle cart built by Nablars that then just has random bits of gold and gems and treasure chests and all sorts of wealth and riches added to it for literally no reason other than for Greases to just show off how opulent and wealthy he is, which I think is perfectly fitting. So, of course, he's got his, so for his character, The two abilities that they highlight to start is that he has the Scepter of the Titans, which they note that the only thing they note about the Scepter of the Titans right now is that it can give him a large power boost, particularly when it comes to taking on other ogres. So presumably is going to have some kind of additional bonuses when he fights other ogres, so he can smash them around and remind them who's boss. And then, of course, he has one of my favorite abilities from tabletop, Everyone Has Their Price, which is, of course, that Greasus has the ability to shower people with wealth in order to make them rethink their allegiances. Because, you know, why keep fighting for your side when you could do something that Greasus wants you to do and become hilariously wealthy in the process? Or, you know, a lot of people, because they are just kind of the dregs of their society and are just like basic troops, if Greasus throws out a whole bunch of gold in front of them, they would probably be much more focused on that than trying to deal with him. But he looks great. I can't wait to see what his scepter actually does, and his crown, of course. His crown that actually makes him kind of smart. Then we got Scragg the Slaughterer, who had a very interesting redesign. He's still very obviously recognizably Scragg, but they actually made him surprisingly more horrific looking. So the big thing with Scragg is that they reveal the lore of the Great Maw. So just like we had the lore page on all of the other lores that we talked about before I left, they are now revealing the final magic lore in the game, which is, of course, the lore of the Great Maw. So the spells are as follows. We have Brain Gobbler, which is a hex where you pick a single target and they take a significant debuff. So it kind of seems a lot like Doom and Darkness, though it looks like it's overcast instead of being AoE, just lasts for longer, but I imagine it will be very similar to Doom and Darkness. Then you've got Bull Gorger, which is that you pick a friendly unit and they get a large buff to their melee attack and armor-piercing damage. Then we've got Tooth Cracker, which increases armor and missile resistance for all units in area. I think we've actually seen all of these in the battle footage, but I'll go ahead and read over them anyway. Bone Crusher, which is an explosion that deals large amount of damage in a smaller AoE that has a wind up before it goes off. And then you have Troll Guts, which is a big ol' heal, a single target large heal. And then the Maw, which is a large, it's the spell you've seen in all the trailers and everything, where the literal maw comes like out of the, it's like a big maw that comes out of the ground, and after a big wind up it goes kaboom and everybody in it gets really, really hurt. Fun, fun, fun. So for the generics, starting with the characters, the lords, we actually have all the lord options. So first you have the Tyrant. So the Tyrants are your big lads and are very good at just like beating the absolute crap out of everyone. As far as what they can do, they have 3 special abilities. The first is Dismember, which is a area hex that decreases acceleration speed and charge speed. Really, really good for running down enemies or stopping in advance. If there's one thing I've learned, is that you cannot underestimate abilities that affect speed. Especially if you are involved in multiplayer. That is a really, really, really important way to be able to mess with your opponent, is decreasing opponent's speed to either significantly lessen the impact of their charges, or when they do charge and they try and commit to a fight, you use this to make it where their commitment ends up being an overcommitment, and then you're able to surround and just beat the tar out of them. So I think Dismember will probably be a very useful ability. And based on the Ogre army abilities, which I have not made a video about yet, but I have kind of looked over the article and will be making a video about it soon. Ogres, of course, do rely very heavily on breaking enemy units and then chasing them down. So this will be super useful for that. Then they also can have Massacre, which is a area of effect augment that gives armor-piercing damage, base damage, and grants all units that are in that area to cause terror. So you can make a giant terror, a terror bomb out of any units, and you also buff all your damage, which is great. And then last is Butcher, which allows you to target a unit that gives very high healing per second and gives significant vigor regeneration. So leave it to the ogres to have a non-wizard hardcore melee lord who also has a regeneration ability. Well, that's terrifying. Okay. Then, of course, there is the Slaughter Masters. So Slaughtermasters are the biggest, baddest of the casters in the Ogre Kingdoms roster. And the starting Slaughtermasters that we have, the only thing they tell us really about them is that they can have the lore of the Great Maw or the lore of beasts. So there are actually a couple of lores missing, which is a bit of a surprise, to be honest. So normally in tabletop, the ogres could also take the lore of death and the lore of heavens. So I'm not sure why they're only doing 2 lores. Hopefully we'll get the other variants in the future, but that's a bit of a weird choice, I'm gonna be honest. I don't know why they just didn't give us all the variants, but I don't know. CA is super weird, honestly, when it comes to giving the races the lores they have in the actual game, like the tabletop. Like, they're like, ah, yes, we're basing the game off 8th edition. But when it comes to wizards, they always end up, not always, but very, very often end up shortchanging the amount of magic lores available to them, which is really dumb, and they should stop doing that. Like, I know we're still missing a number of Slann, we're still missing some Dark Elves, we're still missing Wood Elves, we're still missing now some Ogres, we're still missing, like, the basic Metal Wizard for the Empire. Like, come on, CA, just get it done. Get it done. Anyway, moving on. To the heroes. I think we do have all the heroes, though. So we have all the generic lords, and we have all the heroes. We're just missing some variants for the wizards. So you have the Hunter. So the Ogre Hunter is kind of a character that's more gifted at taking down monsters and other creatures like that. Oh, no, we're actually missing a hero, aren't we? Yes, we are. But the Hunter, I assume he's probably going to be extremely into anti-large. We've seen them kind of fighting on battlefields and trailers and stuff. They tend to carry big old spears. I don't know if they're going to have a shooting attack or not. I presume they will, maybe by throwing javelins or something. But they might just be melee fighters that are able to swing their spears around and cause a significant amount of anti-large damage. But I imagine they're going to be anti-large specialists. And then, of course, they have a mount option, which they are actually the only mount option that they're the only ogre that can take a mount that is generic, which is that the hunters can ride a Stonehorn, which is pretty awesome. And I imagine this character is going to be pretty popular, especially because they're just really cool looking. Then you've got the Butchers. So the Butchers are your caster heroes for the lore of the Great Maw. And once again, they can take the lore of the Great Maw or the lore of Beasts. So they are missing 2 of their lores. And then the last hero is the Firebelly, who honestly looks pretty fantastic. And we've seen all of these abilities already in the battle footage that came out while I was gone. But they are fire wizards, so you have access to lore of fire. And then in addition to that, they also have a fire breath ability. They have Flame Incarnate, which gives them the ward save and reflects melee damage, and then Eruption, which is a big old explosion. So they've got a lot of cool little gimmicks, and they're very, very gifted fire wizards. Really, really cool design. I really like the way they turned out. They had beautiful tabletop models as well. So I'm glad to see that they've turned out just really awesome looking. Then for units, we of course have Nablar. So we have basic Nablar infantry. So they are expendable, which is fantastic. Great meat shields. And they are very easily just slapped around by pretty much everybody. They are meat shields. There's a lot of them in a unit, but they're not particularly fast. They're very unskilled. And they're basically just there to be tar pits and, you know, absorb enemy fire and stuff. However, there is, of course, the more elite version, which are the Nablar Trappers. So the Nablar Trappers are just like the regular Nablars, but they're a little higher skilled. They do have Vanguard deployment, so they can deploy easily. I believe, if I remember correctly, I think they also have stealth until enemies get close. But they have throwing knives, and then, of course, they have their Volley of Traps, which is really, really strong. I actually really like the Volley of Traps ability, which is, it's a passive that if enemies get too close to the Nablar Trappers, they will throw their traps out, and it will not only damage the enemy unit, but drastically slow them. So these guys are really good for wandering around the battlefield and getting close to a vulnerable spot. Like say your opponent's trying to position spears to block like an ogre charge or something. You can use these guys to run up, and when they're repositioning, you can have them run into the Nablar Trappers range, and then they can trap them, so they'll deal damage and slow them down so the ogres can run by them. Or if your enemy has cavalry running around, then these guys do a really good job for being a nuisance for them and being a nasty surprise. Then you have Ogre Bulls. So the Ogre Bulls are basically basic ogres. It's very similar to the mercenary ogres you have, but you'll notice that they don't actually have the regular variant, it looks like they do in the... It seems that when it says variants, I'm assuming this is all the variants, being that dual weapons and Iron Fist. So I'm assuming that means there's not a regular version, or maybe when the first one is supposed to be the regular version. But they do have Iron Fist versions now. As the mercenaries, the mercenary ones only have the single-handed weapon or the dual weapons, and that's it. These guys can go dual weapons, and they can also have Iron Fists, which Iron Fists not only give you melee defense and armor, but they also count as being shielded. So ogres will have bronze shields if they have Iron Fists, which provides a pretty serious amount of additional protection from small arms fire like guns and arrows and stuff. Which is pretty good. That is something you absolutely want to have. I'm thinking they're trying to say there are 3 variants. They just said it weird. Where like this really, where it says monstrous infantry, I feel like this is supposed to say like basic version, and then there's also a dual weapon version, and then there's also an Iron Fist version. So you have your single-handed clubs, your dual clubs, and then your shielded. Of course, all ogres can destroy walls and doors, because ogres are genuinely siege specialists. They have always been siege specialists. That is how they managed to take down the Sky Titans, is that they were able to literally just rip apart all of the structures the Sky Titans tried to hide behind, and force them into battle, and killed them with just their sheer power and numbers. And then you have the Ogre Charge ability, which Ogre Charge is fantastic. And that it makes bracing against them significantly less effective. So even if you've got that, you know, charge defense versus large or you know, expert charge defense and all that stuff, it does not work as good against ogres if they get the charge on you. So ogres always want to be charging. And then if you decide to, or maybe it is just the 2 variants. Maybe it is just the 2 variants. But if you've got the dual weapons, you've got bonus versus infantry, and then if you got Iron Fist, you have extra melee defense, extra armor, and you're shielded. Then there are the Iron Guts, which anyone who had the loving experience of fighting the Ogre Kingdoms in 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy has every right to be afraid of Iron Guts, because you probably fought them a lot. So Iron Guts are, of course, the big elite troops for the Ogre Kingdoms. They're the most heavily armored and are basically like the bodyguards of a lot of the tyrants and tribes and stuff. So for these guys, they have significantly more armor than other ogres, higher stats. They, of course, have very high armor piercing damage, vastly superior armor. And the nice thing about them is, of course, that they all carry these giant 2-handed like blades and clubs and stuff. But generally, they're 2-handed bladed weapons that just cut through armor like butter. Then there are the Man-Eaters, which the Man-Eaters are pretty much the same as they were in the Mercenary pack that we got for Warhammer 2. The only difference is, of course, that instead of there just being a one-handed version, it's now an Iron Fist version. So you've got basically a one-handed weapon and shields version, a great weapons version, and then a one-handed and pistols version. Of course, they're immune to psychology, which is nice, because, you know, they just ignore terror, so that's the whole thing you don't have to worry about. They bring pistols in, so you can get some ogre-sized short-range shooting. Then you have the Saber Tusk pack, which look absolutely fantastic. The Saber Tusks are very spooky, very, very fast, and capable of ripping things apart. It notes that they can have a lot of buffs if there is an Ogre Hunter in the army. Presumably the Ogre Hunter has a skill tree that can be dedicated to buffing them. So you can get them Vanguard deployment, you can get them Stock and Frenzy to just make them all super duper terrifyingly nasty. And they can rampage though, so you can lose control of them if they take too much damage. and it'll be interesting to see. I think a lot of these guys, their stats, though granted the stats are not finalized, but a lot of the initial stat lines for them are available in those battle footage videos, which of course I will be uploading those much later than everybody else, because I'll be doing it next week, but I will be uploading them to talk about them and all that stuff. Then you've got the Gorgers. So the Gorgers have actually gone through a significant redesign, which I actually think makes them more accurate to what they were supposed to be. Their tabletop models had them much more kind of like Morngulls, where they were these like hideously thin, super stretched out, nasty looking creatures. Whereas now they're, if anything, they're more uncomfortable to look at. Like, they're still nasty and disgusting, but they're a lot more muscular. Essentially, that their new design, they look much more like ogres that have gone rabid and are just pure raw muscle. You know, they don't have any more of the fat or the, you know, the, like, facial hair and a lot of the other aspects that we kind of, when you see an ogre, helps you kind of identify that you're looking at an ogre. But I do actually like their new design more than their old design, because to me it honestly feels like they look more like part of the ogre species. I feel like the old design was a bit too close to being a Wendigo type creature, in that they were like famine thin and they looked much more freakishly alien. I do hope, though, that, because they do talk about it a little bit in this blurb, I really hope they have a terrifying animation where their jaws, like, unhinge and they eat somebody or bite them in half or something, when we get the Blood for the Blood God 3-pack. So, of course, they do talk about that they're not armored at all, but they're quite stealthy, have high armor piercing, specialized in anti-infantry. They are unbreakable, which is awesome. And then, of course, they come with Vanguard deployment. So they're Vanguard deployment. They're very stealthy, but they're completely unbreakable, so they'll fight to the bitter end, which is very, very nasty on a unit that specializes in dealing high amounts of damage. Then for the first monster, you have the Giant, of course, the good old basic Giant. So this design is very funny to me because I have no idea how it sees. Because it literally has this giant bowl on its head, and there's no eye slits. Like, how does the Giant know where it's going? I have no idea how this thing knows where it's going. But, yeah, so anyway, it's, you know, it's a basic Giant. There's nothing super crazy about it. It has a unique design at least, but there's no, like, unique traits to it. Then the Stonehorn, which is, of course, the unique big monster that we're starting with. Unfortunately, we do not have a Thunder Tusk here right at the beginning, nor do we have the Yetis. So the Thunder Tusk, the Yetis, and the Bruiser, which the Bruiser is basically just the basic combat hero, so it's like the Tyrant, but for heroes, which we know that CA is very, very, very fond of leaving out the, like, basic combat hero and then adding them in later. I don't know why that's their strategy, but it tends to be. So presumably we will see the Bruiser later, but yeah, the Yetis and the Thunder Tusk, so all of the ice-themed monsters are missing from the roster. But other than that, everything's in. So you got the Stonehorns, which this is the basic melee version, which is just a big old angry monster that can just blast through people. They have a nice amount of missile resistance. Not as much as I think they should have, but they do have a good amount. They do have a ton of armor and are excellent for just, like, plowing through anything that gets in their way. Then on to missile units. You have the, of course, the Lead Belchers, who look fantastic, which is that they have their, you know, good melee combatants because they are still ogres, but they do have all of that massive firepower with their big old balls of just random nonsense that they've shoved into their cannons, firing out to blast people about that they're firing at. Don't have a ton of ammunition, but of course they are easily able to get into combat and mess people up. So, you know, they're a nice shooting unit that cannot easily be dealt with. with like fast cavalry and other things that traditionally can tear apart other missile units. You know, they're a very heavy missile infantry unit. Then there's also the Stonehorn with harpoon launcher. So Stonehorns, of course, can have riders. I think this one up here just has like a basic melee rider, but this one actually has a shooting rider. So you have a harpoon launcher, which is just a big spear gun that really hurts if you get shot, because it's basically just a colossal crossbow. So presumably it'll be just as good as the melee version. It'll just also have a shooting attack, which is fantastic. Then you have Mournfang Cavalry, which we have seen, of course, as part of the Ogre Mercenaries. But once again, they have the we have an Iron Fist version and a Great Weapon version. So, you know, awesome. You can either have them with shields and extra armor, or you can run Great Weapons, which gives them anti-large and makes them just absolutely beat the hell out of everybody. And then this was actually a really pleasant surprise for me, was the Rhinox Writers. So I honestly thought the Rhinox Writers would be a DLC or free DLC that we would get eventually. I'm super pleased to see them in the base roster, but they are, of course, even more crazy and elite and colossal cavalry. So they're like even bigger than Mournfang Riders. These guys were terrifying when they were added to the Ogre Kingdoms. They were never as part of the original books, but there was a White Dwarf article in 6th edition that would allow you to take Rhinox Riders, and they were obscene. So they're called Crushers now, which Crushers is actually the name for the unit champion of a... So if you had a unit of Mournfang Riders, the unit champion would be called a Crusher. But CA just cleverly made it where the Crusher is now just a new unit type, which is the Rhinox Riders. And I think that's awesome. And I'm super duper happy to have them in the base roster. They look fantastic. And they come with the same variants. So you can run them with Iron Fist if you want more tanky and with shields, or you can run Great Weapons for anti-large and just smashing people apart. And they look absolutely incredible. And can't wait to play with them. And then for artillery and war machines, we got the Scrap Launcher, which we've seen in a lot of the trailers and some of the battle footage, which is a construction by the Nablars, and it's their most hilarious invention ever. And also kind of gives you an idea of like the level of skill when it comes to style that the Nablars would be able to utilize for Greasis's cart. And I think that Greasis's cart looks like it's in a very similar design style to the Scrap Launcher. It's just much less rickety and of course glammed up, so I personally like it a lot. And then so you know, it's great. It's I do like that the ogres do not have any easily dealt with shooting. Like, all of their artillery are monsters and all of their shooting except for the Nablar Trappers are like ogres or monsters. So, you know, it's gonna be really interesting to see ogres in game, because a lot of the typical ways to deal with an army will not work as well against them. You know, where you have like, oh, I'll take some of these you know, fast light melee troops so I can tear apart the enemy shooting if I get into their back line. It's like, well, the ogres don't have a back line, or their back line is like just as scary as their front line. So of course the Scrap Launcher is a hardcore catapult that it does not have much in the way of armor piercing, but it's able to hit like a large area, so it's great for messing with infantry and tearing apart lighter armored troops, especially probably like enemy ranged units. And then you have the Iron Blaster, which the Iron Blaster is one of the giant guns of the Sky Titans, lashed up to a big wagon pulled by Rhinox. So not only is it terrifying in close combat, but it hits like an absolute truck. Sounds like it doesn't have a ton of ammo, but at the same time, the Iron Blaster is probably going to hit obscenely hard when it shoots, and then when it's not shooting, it is an ogre chariot pulled by a Rhinox with an actual ogre driver. So it's probably going to be pretty nasty in close combat. I think the Ogre roster, for being, you know, a pre-order race DLC, looks really, really strong. There is just a small handful of things missing from the entire roster, though to be fair, they also added something to the roster with the Rhinox Writers. So I think it's a really good starting place. I am really looking forward to getting the Thunder Tusk, the Yetis, who will definitely need a redesign because their current models are hideously old and do not look good. And then, of course, the Bruiser generic hero. And then as far as lords go, I think most people would agree that Golgfag Maneater is a must-have. You know, hopefully we can get him sooner rather than later. And then at some point down the line, I think there's a very good chance of getting Gark Ironskin. He's kind of gone from being a character really around the fringes to, I would say, being a community favorite. Especially because he's like the big mounted character, because he has his Chaos Dwarf created metallic Rhinox, which is pretty wild. But yeah, I think this all looks really, really good. I will say the only thing I'm disappointed by is the lores for the Slaughtermaster and the Butcher. That's the only thing that genuinely disappointed me. I don't know why they would give them just the lore of the Great Maw and the lore of Beasts, and that's it. Like, to me, that feels really strange. Where it's like, oh, you know, for Cathay, there's, you know, 4 lores of magic. Kislev's got 2, Ogre's got 2, and then all the demons are going to have 2, except for Korn, who obviously has none. Actually, no, Zinch has 3, because he's got a lore fire wizard in there. But, especially, like, I could see maybe, like, oh, they don't have the lore of death in at the moment. Well, no, because lore of death, Nurgle's going to have access to the lore of death and the lore of Nurgle. So, I don't know, to me, it's really weird that they would not have the lore of heavens and the lore of death as part of this, considering those lores are already in the game. So, it's not like, oh, the ogres would have been the only races with these lores, so maybe they just didn't want to rework them yet. No, like, we have the Astromancer for Cathay, and then Nurgle is going to have access to the lore of Nurgle and the lore of death. Those are his 2 lores. So I don't know, super weird to me. I really hope that we get those eventually. I really don't like when CA just randomly like cuts out variants or content for seemingly no reason, and they really like to do it with wizards. And like, it can't be a balance thing, because eventually, you know, like, the High Elves have access to every single lore of magic, and it didn't break the game. So I really don't see the excuse for, like, not giving all the races all the lores they should have. But, I don't know. In any event, that's going to be it for me on this. The roster looks really, really strong. I will say, when I heard that we were getting 2 legendary lords instead of 4, I was worried the roster was going to be like Norska size, but I'm pleased to see that's not the case. Like, it's literally pretty much the entire book with the exception of 2 units and a generic character. So I think it's a really strong roster. I hope to see more added to it in the future. I mean, they could easily, if they wanted to, they could do a Lord pack. And they have pretty much just enough to do it all. You know, you could do a Lord pack that has like Golgfag Maneater in it, and do like Thunder Tusk, Yetis, the Bruiser, and then maybe for the last thing you add like another variant of Maneaters or something. But I think it looks really strong. I'm very excited for the Ogres. I'm pretty much just waiting to see Nurgle and presumably Be'lakor, the 9th character, before I think I will start to go through the horror that will be deciding who to play first. But it looks like a lot of fun. So thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. I gotta get back to painting. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Bye, bye-bye, bye-bye.